And the first is alignment, which most of you guys have probably talked about in terms of a lot of these postures.
Kate, I don't mean to interrupt you in the very beginning,
No, go
but
for it.
I didn't ask your consent for me to videotape for Bridget and Mariah who's missing.
Yeah.
Is that okay?
Yeah, you need to sign a waiver.
I just don't want to do it without you knowing about, you know what I'm saying, in respect for you.
Is it already going?
I just started it.
Candace and I are here if you have any legal questions about it.
All right. Is that limited to yoga or could it So proper alignment is a really big deal, especially in back bending. And that goes for all of the postures that you're going to be teaching to other people, but back bending is a very vulnerable position, and it requires a lot of opening and a lot of strengthening for any of the back bending postures that we're going to talk about. So engagement is the second thing that I want to think about. Once you get your body into proper alignment, where to engage your muscles to support in the right places. So most of you guys have probably had some experience in a back bending class where you've woken up the next day with a twinge in your back. Mm-hmm. And that's an indication of engaging in the wrong muscles, trying to use your back muscles to lift yourself up rather than like the bigger muscle groups that we have to strengthen around that. So that's the second thing we're going to talk about. And then the third thing is sequencing, and that's sort of going to go through the entire session. So it's equally as important to warm up for the back bend that you want to teach. Have you guys talked about peak poses? Mm-hmm. Okay. So your warm-up is super important, just to think about connecting with the correct muscle groups and then opening up in the joints that you need to support yourself in these structures. And then it's also important to take lots of time, especially with back bends, to cool down afterwards. Back bends tend to build some tension in the body, which is part of the purpose. So it's important to take a lot of time at the end of class to unwind all that tension.
With inversions earlier today, Grace was saying that like if you can't do a shoulder stand yourself, you definitely don't need to be teaching it. Is that the same sort of idea with back bends? Like you probably should not be teaching it if
Yeah,
you don't know the
definitely.
line
If it's
in
not a
your
part of
body.
your personal practice that you've got firsthand experience with, then I wouldn't recommend teaching it to someone else. Mm-hmm. Yeah, just for a safety.
Sure.
Safety
Hey,
thing.
and I have 2 and number 3, but I didn't get number. What was the
Number 1 is alignment. So it's alignment, engagement, and sequencing are the 3 things we're going to be really focusing on. So we're going to go through 5 back bending postures today. I was going to put y'all through a little warm-up sequence so we can talk about what muscles we're warming up and why. And then we're going to break apart these 5 postures, and we're going to do as many variations as I can think of with as many props as we can. All right? Because I know you guys, it's the it's the 3rd day of your training. You're already really tired. So we're going to please take it really easy. I've already had this conversation with a couple of you guys, but just don't push yourself too far because you've still got to get to your 3 classes next week, and you got to get through till October. So we're going to be looking at Shalambhasana. You guys need the spelling for these postures?
Please.
Okay, it's Shalambhasana. And that's locust pose, so it's the one you do on your belly, like Superman. And then Dhanurasana, Danurasana.
Does it have an H after the D?
Does it? You probably know better than
The H's are interchangeable. It doesn't matter where you put H's in Sanskrit.
that. Yeah.
Either way.
I actually thought about that because Grace emailed me the postures that she wanted me to teach, and I was like, Dhanurasana, that's not how I've been spelling it. That's how Grace spelled it, so I'm going to say no H. So that's bow pose. It's a downward facing back bend. And we're going to look at bridge pose, Setu Bandha. So S-E-T-U, I think. B-A-N-D. optional H, A. And then we'll look at full wheel, Urdhva Dhanurasana, URDVA, Dhanurasana. That's your upward facing bow pose. And the last one we'll look at is Ustrasana, camel pose. And that's USTRASANA.
Can you say it again?
Ustrasana. And are you guys familiar with, the more grounding energetics of back bends and the more uplifting energetics of back bends? Have you guys talked much about energetics in these classes? So I believe Sarla did my training with me when I learned back bends. And we're taught that the downward facing back bends are more grounding. So those are the better ones typically to teach in your evening classes. You don't necessarily want to put people into a full upward facing wheel at 7 o'clock in the evening. That's when folks go home and have crazy dreams and like weird digestive issues and stuff, because it's just so late in the evening, your body's trying to kind of come down and get grounded after your most energetic part of the day. And back bends have that energizing property. So upward facing tend to be more energizing, they're good to do in the mornings, and downward facing tend to be a little bit more grounding. You're just closer to the earth. You've got more of a physical connection with the earth because you're on your belly.
Could you just, which ones are downward ones?
So downward facing is Shalambhasana, the locust pose, and Dhanurasana, the bow pose.
And then the other ones you mentioned are the upward.
Upward facing. Ustrasana is kind of in between. So Ustrasana, we'll also talk about the adrenal glands. You get a really big squeeze in your adrenal glands with that camel pose, so I would suggest more of a morning practice for camel pose. I don't teach that one a whole lot in the evening, but it's been known to happen. All right, and props are super, super helpful when it comes to back bending. So today I've got you all set up with 2 blocks and 1 belt. And the blocks are really helpful as far as engagement goes. A lot of times when people move into back bends, this is the tendency for the knees to move apart. And I'll have you guys all do this in a second. If you lay down here and just put your knees together, you can actually feel your back almost flat against the floor. And so that's the idea. When your knees are together, your low back has a little bit more space. Whereas when your knees fall apart, you're in a back bend, your sacrum's kind of crunching together underneath you. And that's why we use blocks to kind of squeeze together between the knees. But we'll get there in just a second.
What about bridge though? And that seems like that would be, when I've been to classes in the evening, that's done. Is that still considered
Yeah, so
upward?
bridge pose is pretty, you've got a good connection with the ground because your whole arms are connected, your feet are connected. And my suggestion, or usually what I do with bridge pose in the evening, is either do it with support, with a block under the sacrum, or dynamic bridge. So you're not really holding it for a long time. The longer you hold it, the more of a squeeze you're giving those adrenal glands in your back, and the more energizing it's going to be. I mean, it's a physical reaction that your body has when you put it into that position. It sends messages to your brain that say, like, wake up and get moving. So, but bridge pose is a super common one. It's a really basic posture. And, it's important to do some sort of back bend in every class that you teach to have a well-balanced class. So bridge is one of the more common ones, or Shalambhasana. So it really depends on what you're trying to accomplish in your class. If you do, if a back bend is your peak pose, then maybe you want to get more into bridge or Ustrasana. Whereas if your peak pose is, an arm balance that's not necessarily connected to back bending, just throw something easy in there like Shalambhasana or something like that. Make sense?
Thank you.
Any other questions?
Yeah, I'm just really curious. So I'm not asking you to qualify yourself or anything like that, but why are you the back bend lady? Do you love them? Are you like Grace for
inversions? Get out of town.
Because Grace obviously loves inversions, so that's obvious why she taught
So
that.
she gave me the choice. This was the weekend that you guys were going to do back bends and inversions, and Inversions are really Grace's thing. I don't really think there's a much of a better person to get you geared up to do inversions than Grace. And plus, there were more of those than there were back then.
Okay. I didn't know if you were just crazy.
I'm glad you didn't need me to qualify myself.
No.
So I absolutely have anything to do that.
But can you do full wheel? That's the real question.
Yeah.
Can I do full wheel? Yeah, girl.
Qualified.
Do any of you guys have some hesitations about some of these postures? Are there any that aren't a part of your regular practice? Or
Full wheel.
full wheel? Is that mostly everybody's?
I
Okay.
don't do it on my own, I'll do it in a class if there's somebody there.
Okay, you don't do it in your home practice, but you'll do it.
Yeah, I would say the same. I do full
Teacher.
wheel in a Ashtanga class.
I mean,
love,
yeah.
I love full wheel.
I'm
It
sure
feels
you
so
do.
good.
You've got somebody to demonstrate there. Yeah, well, he's so backbendy anyways, you know, you've got a lot of, he's so open, so he'll be a good guinea pig then.
He did scorpion for us earlier.
I
Oh,
know.
nice. Yeah, y'all worked on scorpion already? So you've already done some backbending. You should-
No, he did.
No, he
He
did.
did.
I said, oh, wow.
Yeah.
What? Party poses.
Right.
We did pinch earlier, so a little backbendy,
Mhm.
right?
Yeah,
Nobody's gonna remember that.
that's my nemesis.
So
That's
cute.
the one that I'm like, every
I like
3 or 4
that
months,
pose.
I'm like, shit, I just have to teach. All right, well, let's go ahead and get started. I'm gonna go ahead and get through this stuff so that we can do some restorative yoga.
Yeah.
All right,
So we
so,
need to have pen and paper, or are we gonna be smooth?
keep it close by. You might wanna jot down some action instructions and that sort of thing, but you don't have to write down every single thing I say. You've got a video. So, one posture that a lot of teachers like to use to start class out when it comes to backbending is Virasana. So if that shape doesn't bother your knees, you're gonna come on to your knees, separate your heels so they're a little bit wider than your hips, and bring your knees and thighs all the way together. Now, most of you guys are gonna want a block or two to place underneath your sit bones. The sit bones come to the block or the floor in between your heels. And just looking at this posture, can anybody tell me what we're working on? What it's stretching out? Quads, yeah. So your quads and your shoulders are really important to open up when it comes to backbending, because you gotta reach back for your heels, you gotta reach back for the floor. And a lot of us spend so much of our time seated in chairs that these hip flexors are usually at like a 90-degree angle. So Virasana is a nice way to help stretch the tissue of your quadriceps over your knee joints, and you get a little bit more length here. Now, if any of you guys feel comfortable, if your sit bones are all the way on the ground, and you want to move back into more of a stretch here, you can either come down to your elbows or lie down on your back, and you're in that Supta Virasana shape. That's just an option. So for some people,
I forgot.
it's hero's pose.
Hero.
Mhm.
Okay.
And this is good for digestion too.
What is?
I really like this spot. I think it was this awesome.
Virasana is great for digestion.
Remember, Vajrasana is when your heels are underneath. It's thunderbolt underneath your buttocks.
Wow, Kevin. You really know your
Well, I'm just.
script.
No, really?
What is the translation? So like Virabhadrasana?
Vajrasana is thunderbolt with a J,
Oh.
and that's when you're sitting on your
Oh, okay.
like that, and then Virasana is hero. There's a reason around it.
It just
How
sounds
does that
so
relate to
similar
Virabhadrasana?
Vajrasana.
Right, I get
that
that
I've got
confused all the
tangled
time.
up. Yeah.
No, I guess a hero is kind of like a warrior.
Good way to justify it.
All right, you guys. So we're going to just spend a few moments to drop into your breath. So if you're lying on your back, please close your eyes and let your internal gaze rest at your third eye chakra. For those of you seated upright, let's flip the palms up. So the backs of your hands are resting on your knees. Everybody with eyes softly shut, and just begin to cultivate big, relaxed breath. So remembering that back bends are heart openers. Please begin to draw your breath into the space right behind your heart. So with each inhalation, you feel the top of your chest expanding. And the breastbone rising towards the ceiling. And with each exhalation, let there be a soft, heavy quality in your shoulders and in the front of your chest. If you're familiar with Samavriti, then please begin now. Inhaling and exhaling to the count of 4. And finally, if you feel comfortable, you can add a retention at the top of your inhalation. So inhaling silently to the count of 4, maybe holding that in breath for 2 counts. And exhaling silently to the count of 4. For those of you practicing the retention, you might sense your breath swirling in that space right behind your heart. Just tuning into the energy building there as you open up for your practice. Just completing 2 more full rounds of breath. Following your next exhalation, releasing the count of your breath. Join your palms in front of your heart. And take a moment to set some intention. And releasing your hands to the tops of your knees. Let your gaze slowly lift. Alright, so everybody's sitting up. This Virasana shape starting to bother your knees, you can come on into an easy cross-leg position. If you feel pretty good in Virasana, you can stay here. And we're going to start by opening up the shoulders. So on an inhalation, reach your arms towards the sky. Now just place your right hand on your right shoulder blade. Reach for your elbow and draw that elbow in towards your ear. Good. And now a tendency here is for us to go ahead and start back bending. So if you feel like your low ribs are sticking out, engage the belly a little bit more to find some length in your low back. And try to focus the action just in that shoulder socket. So even if you need to bring your elbow down a little bit, just looking for some kind of sensation. Good. you'll keep your right hand where it is, release your left arm, sweep that arm behind your back, and if you can, you'll interlace your fingers, and if not, you'll press your hands into your body. Good, and you'll notice that the sensation's a little bit different. So now with this left arm back behind you, you might feel it more in the top of your shoulder. Just looking at how the different rotation makes a different sensation. And then you can even add a little deeper stretch by gently rotating your head. So start by turning your head gently to your left. Notice where you feel the stretch. So you guys feel that in your trapezius muscle on the right side. And then slowly come back to center. Good, and then very gently to the right. Be super easy with your neck. Good. And then you might feel that more on the top of your left shoulder. You might feel it on the left side of your neck. Good, and come back to center. And release your right arm straight up towards the sky. Good, then sweep your left arm up to meet your right. And on an exhalation, take both arms wide, just like the letter T. And then bring your right arm across your chest. Good, just place your hand below your elbow. Drop that right shoulder away from your ear as you pull your arm towards your left shoulder. Yeah. So the other way, across your chest. And then the more you drop that shoulder down, the more you'll feel it in your tricep muscle. Sometimes in the deltoid too, depends on where you've got some tightness. Good. On your next inhalation, take both arms towards the sky. We'll just switch sides. So it's left arm to the left shoulder blade. Now reach for your elbow. Resist poking your ribs out as you bring that elbow in towards your ear. And then keeping that left hand planted, release your right arm. Reach back for your fingertips. Again, not important that you touch fingertips. If that's not happening, you'll just press your hands into your body and you'll still feel a stretch there. And notice the difference in sensation just by changing the angle in your arm. And then deepen the stretch. You can turn your gaze gently to the right. Just pausing whenever you feel the sensation. And bring your gaze back to center. And turn your head gently to the left. Whoops. And lifting your gaze back to center. Please release your left arm towards the ceiling. And sweep your right arm up to meet your left. And on an exhalation, take the palms wide, just like the letter T. Good, bring your left arm across your chest, and with your right hand just beneath your left elbow. Good, drop your left shoulder away from your ear as you bring your arm in. Good. Nice. And just release that left arm. Good, swing both arms up towards the sky. And from here, we'll roll over the knees, bring your hands to the floor, and come into an all fours position. So a lot of times after Virasana, we lose the sensation in our toes. Roll one set of toes underneath, stretch your heel back. And that's actually part of what we're trying to do here. You're restricting the blood flow so that when you release the pose, you get fresh oxygenated blood moving into all those muscles. It's the same thing with twisting. Oh, I'll just skip that. I'm already on a tangent, right? All right, so come on down to your all fours position. And we'll wake up to vertebra, cat and cow. So on your exhalation, you'll round into your back. Be sure that your head is involved, so the chin drops to the chest. On your inhalation, just soften your belly towards the floor. Think about lifting your sit bones, lifting your gaze. And continue with your breath. Exhaling to round. Inhaling to arch. And this is a good place to check in with what your body feels like and whether there's already some tightness happening in your back. So if you feel a little twinge on one side or the other, it's a good indication to move extra easy today. Remembering that you don't have to do every single variation in these poses. The most important thing is to focus on how you feel and let your yoga practice support that. So let's just take 2 more rounds in each direction. And on your next exhalation, find a neutral all fours position. Take your hips back towards your heels. Keep your arms fully extended. So you're in an active child's pose. On your next inhalation, walk your hands over to your right. So you're stretching out the left side of your ribs. And take about 2 or 3 breaths into your left lung. So you'll feel the muscles between your ribs expanding when you breathe. And walking your hands back to center. Then taking both hands to your left. So these side stretches are great warm-ups for back bends. Getting a little action in your rib cage. Any posture that helps stretch out and make space for your lungs to expand is a great warm-up for a back bend. So that being said, bring your hands back to center. Lift yourself up to your hands and knees, and then step your right foot out wide for a gate pose. You might step on your neighbor's mat. But be sure that you're grounded through the pinky toe side of your right foot, so the toes turn straight forward. Good. And then press into your left foot, come on up to kneeling, and take your arms next to your ears. All right, so with the arms lifted, point your tailbone down towards the floor, then release your right arm down your right leg, and sweep your left arm over your left ear. Now, I want you to think about supporting from the belly in this shape. So our tendency is to want to stretch as far as we can, and we're crunching down on the right lung and the right rib cage. Be sure you can breathe into that right lung. So maybe take it up a little bit higher, and then find the stretch by reaching through your left arm rather than bending sideways. Great, you guys. Nice. And on your next inhalation, come back up to center. The right arm lifts. Good. You'll just circle your hands down underneath your shoulders. And bring your right knee in. Step your left foot wide. And ground through your left pinky toe. Be sure that your toes point straight ahead. And then come on up. Good. The arms reach for the sky. The tailbone points down. And then left arm down the left leg. And gently reach with your right arm. Really good.
I don't know, I think I just did that side.
Yeah, I think you did too. Good, so notice that your glutes have to work when your tailbone's pointing down towards your knee. If you let the glutes go, that's when you start to overarch the low back. And on your next inhalation, come back to center. Both arms lift. And you'll circle both hands down to the floor. Release your left knee. And make your way back to downward facing dog. Good. We won't spend a whole lot of time here. I know your shoulders are probably tired. But give your legs a little pedal. So you're stretching the calf muscles and the backs of your legs. And even here, you might notice some differences from side to side. So let's take 3 more rounds of breath. Feel free to keep wiggling, or if you're ready, you can find your way to stillness. Be sure that the back of your neck is totally relaxed. On your next inhalation, move forward to plank pose. Release your knees down to the floor. Untuck your feet and lower all the way down to your chest. Now we'll do our first back bend. It's baby cobra. So draw the inner edges of your legs together. Press your pelvis down into the mat And then just using your back muscles, barely lift your chest. Good, now point your nose down towards the floor so the airway in your throat is open. And notice what muscles are working here. Please squeeze your glutes, point your tailbone towards the backs of your heels. Keep that action, maybe lift the chest half an inch higher. And on your next exhalation, release down to your forehead. Press up to an all fours position, and then slowly sit back to child's pose, giving those back muscles a moment to stretch back out. Good, so child's pose is a great counter pose for back bending, but it's important to move slowly into this posture, just because your muscles in your back aren't made to be like a rubber band. They have to sort of slowly adapt to the new pose. Now on your next inhalation, come up to your hands and knees. Curl your toes under. Find downward facing dog. And from this down dog, come high up on your toes. Walk your feet towards your hands and come into a fold at the top of your mat. Now we're going to work some on the hips here. So if you know you've got tight hips, then reach for a block or two. Set those underneath your palms. Now bring your heels together, separating your toes so you're like a ballerina in first position. And then let your hips shift gently to your left as you walk your hands over to the right. And this will give you a lot of information about what's happening in your left IT band. These hips have to work a lot to help support your back and back bending postures. So it's a good idea to warm them up, just so your mind's connected with the muscles that have to work. Now you can bring your hips and your hands back to center, and then slowly switch sides. The hips shift right and the hands walk left. And let your head relax. Notice what's happening now on the outside of your right leg. Just feeling whatever sensations are happening there and any differences between the first and second sides. Walk your hands back to center. Lift yourself up halfway, separating your heels so the feet are back at hips distance. Good, and from this forward fold, bend both knees. Bring your hands to the floor and step your left foot back for a lunge. Now, keeping those left toes curled, release your left knee to the floor, and then come on up to kneeling with your hands on your right knee. Now, think about this. The higher you lift your chest, the deeper that back bend is going to be. So if you already know there's some tension happening there, let your chest lean a little bit further forward. And then we're going to warm up a little bit more on these quads just by sinking the hips towards the right heel. For those of you that feel pretty good in this shape, you might lift the chest a little higher. And for that full extension in the chest, you can take your arms next to your ears. Now notice, just by lifting your arms, you're stretching this fascia across the front of your body. So you might feel more of a stretch into that hip flexor, or maybe up into the front of your chest. And there's my lunch. Hello. And on your next exhalation, release your hands. Be sure your left hand is directly beneath your left shoulder, and then circle your right arm up towards the ceiling. And then a little twist here. So you're restricting the blood flow into the muscles across your spine, so that when you unwind, you get fresh, oxygenated blood. On an exhale, release your right hand outside your right foot. Good. Relift your left knee so you're in a low lunge. And then hop your left foot forward to meet your right. Before you first. Watch your heads. All right. On an in breath, be mindful of your neighbor. Lift up halfway. Good. Then exhale and fold.
Okay, now your turn.
From here, let's bend the knees. Roll yourself to standing. Good. Let's take the arms straight up towards the sky. It's like Studio B. And then exhale, drag your hands through center. Fold over. On your next in-breath, lift up halfway, nice long spine. And then step your right foot back into that lunge. Now keep the right toes curled. Just release your knee to the floor. Good, then bring your hands to the top of your left knee. Start to lift the chest. And don't lift so high that you feel a twinge in your back. Keep your chest slightly lower. Good, start to soften your hips towards your left heel. And feel that stretch now in the right quadricep muscles. You might feel it all the way up into the belly and the top of the psoas. And then if you want to take the stretch deeper, you can release arms next to the ears. And notice how the sensation changes just by lifting your arms. So it's just more of a stretch of this fascia across the front of your body. This is already a back bend. And on your next exhale, right hand beneath the right shoulder. And you'll circle your left arm up towards the ceiling, bringing out the spine. And take about 3 more breaths here. Okay, think about opening the chest, even in this twist, like you're extending out through the collarbones, heart reaching forward, shoulders back. Good, and then left hand to the floor. Extend your right knee and step back to down dog. And we'll take our first true vinyasa, so you'll move forward to plank pose. Rock forward on your tippy toes and lower all the way down to your chest. You can lower your knees if you like. And then on your in-breath, peel your heart up, maybe pressing gently into the hands. Good, pause here for a moment. Be sure the tailbone's reaching towards the heels. The shoulders are rolling back, yeah. Beautiful, exhale, release down. And then lift up to 4s. Curl your toes, find downward facing dog. Good, great counter pose for back bends. If you walk your feet all the way together and point your tailbone towards your heels, you'll find that nice little stretch right in the low part of your back. On your next inhalation, come high up on your toes. Make your way forward. Pause in Uttanasana, that standing forward fold. Good, inhale here, lift halfway up. Exhale, fold forward. And then roll yourself to standing. Let the spine head be heavy. Inhale, arms reach up. And exhale, fold back over your legs. Good. With the knees nice and soft, please step your left foot back into a lunge. This time, keep your left knee fully extended. Come light up on your fingertips, just finding the strength in your legs. And then come on up to a standing lunge. Place your hands on your hips. Good. Find the engagement in that back leg. So the heels reaching back, the back of the knees reaching up. And then if you'd like to add a little deeper back bend, you'll take the arms up. You might even lift your gaze. And with the belly nice and strong to help support your low back, you might even lift your heart. And then notice if you've gone too far, just back off a little bit. Good, last big breath. And left hand under the left shoulder. We'll circle the right arm up towards the sky. And find a stretch in that right IT band. So you're reaching your hip crease towards the back of your mat. Yeah. Good, now keep this twist in the upper body. Right arm straight up to the sky. Release your left knee to the floor. Good, and some of you will pause right here. This is already a stretch for your left quad. If you want to take it deeper, you can bend your left knee and reach back for the top of that foot. Yeah, so this is like the Grace special. Good, big stretch for the quad. Remember, if you've gone too far, you always have the option to back off. And if you've got the back foot, slowly release. Cartwheel right hand outside the right foot. Good, you'll re-extend your left knee. And hop your left foot forward to meet your right. On your in-breath, lift up halfway. Exhale, fold forward. And roll yourself to standing. Inhale, arms reach for the sky. And exhale, fold forward once again. Good, long spine on your inhale, waking up the muscles in your back. Good, as you exhale, soften your knees and float your right foot back into a lunge. Now find the strength in that back leg, then come light up on your fingertips. And slowly lift yourself to standing. Start with your hands on your hips. Good, the more you stretch your left knee forward, right heel back, the more you'll feel the stretch in that right hip flexor. And if you've still got some space to move, you might take your arms next to your ears, engaging the muscles in your belly to help support your back. You might start to lift your chest towards the ceiling. So remember, back bends are more in the upper part of your spine. It's as if your shoulder blades could come together behind you and lift your heart towards the ceiling. Tailbone still reaching down towards the floor. Good, last 2 breaths. And as you exhale, it's right hand beneath the right shoulder. Circle your left arm towards the sky and stretch that left hip crease towards the back of your mat, opening up the IT band. Nice. Now keeping the twist in your upper body, just release right knee to the floor. And then if it's available, you might bend the right knee and reach back for the top of your foot. Good, notice what this feels like in your quadricep muscles as well as your left shoulder. And one more breath. Good, release that back foot. Left hand outside the left foot. Good, please lift your right knee for the low lunge and step back to down dog. And on your next inhalation, move forward to plank. Lower all the way down to your chest. And extend your arms along down your sides. So you're on your belly, yep. All right, so we're looking at Shalambhasana. The inner edges of your legs come together. Good, the pubic bone presses down into the mat. Please keep the tops of your feet on the floor. Just lift your upper body, arms, head, and chest. This is your first variation on locust pose. The nose points down towards the floor. Be sure you're at a sustainable height where you can breathe and where you're not crunching the low back. Feel the glutes working to move the tailbone down. Good, last breath. And then rest on your right cheek. Shoulders can round towards the floor. Good, let your glutes relax here. So if you let your heels flop out to the side, you'll feel your booty get nice and soft and juicy. Good. This is a good place to connect with your heartbeat. So back bends tend to be energizing. The heartbeat tends to get fast. Feel if there's a slight lift there. Bring your head back to center. Bring your bed back to center. Squeeze the legs together just like before. Good. Press your pubic bone down. And then lift upper and lower body as long as that feels good on your back. Let your nose point towards the floor. Notice how hard your legs have to work to keep your heels towards one another. They don't have to touch, but they're moving in that direction. And last 2 breaths here. And release. Rest on your opposite cheek. Shoulders can round. And let your heels fall out to the sides and notice how you feel. So I always encourage students to breathe into the belly after these back bending postures. As the front of your body expands, the muscles on the back plane of your body are wrapping around. There's a little bit more space to release there. And then third variation on locust pose would be to clasp your palms together behind your back. Good, now if that's not happening for you today, you can release the hands along down your sides just like before. Good, press your pelvis down, draw your legs together. Now on an inhalation, lift yourself up. Good. Notice with the palms interlaced, there's more of a stretch in the deltoid muscle in the top of the shoulder. And just 2 more breaths here. And on your exhalation, please release. Stack your hands in front of your face. Ground your forehead into your palms. Good. And back bends sometimes have a tendency to build tension in the neck. Let your head roll gently from right to left here. Just reminding those muscles on either side of your neck that they can relax. So for most of us that hold a lot of tension in our neck and shoulders, those muscles forget how to let go. And this is a good way to remind them. Whenever you're ready, you'll just find your way to stillness. And take a few more big breaths low into your belly. Please walk your hands back so they're right underneath your shoulders. Lift yourself up to an all-fours position. And then just sit back on your heels, look forward for a second. Do any of you have any questions about Shalabhasana? Is that locust pose? Feel pretty good? Is there anything weird happening in your body?
Just my lunch.
Yeah. So those are actually good for your digestion because you've got your belly pressed into the floor. And again, like sending some fresh blood flow in your tum-tums.
Will you illustrate it?
Yeah.
To be able to walk through.
So this is one of the most basic back bends that we teach because it's all focused on the strength of your back. It's hard to overdo it here. So the idea is to squeeze the legs together. If your legs are wide, remember you're crunching in on your sacrum. So knees come towards one another, inner big toes touch. The pubic bone presses down, and that requires you to engage your glutes to send the tailbone towards the heel. So again, lengthen the back. And then on the inhalation is when you lift up. All right? So the idea, a lot of times students will roll their shoulders forward. It gets really hard to breathe here if there's no space in the front of your chest. So you want to think about rolling the shoulders back. Usually the thumbs turn down towards the floor. And then if you've got palms interlaced, then you're stretching the knuckles back. All right? Second variation is to lift the heels. And just because you're using only the muscles in your back, it's hard to overdo it. Whereas in that full back bend, you're pressing into other parts of your body and your back just kind of has to react. All right? So this is a good strengthener. And then,
Is it
again,
the same thing as Superman?
I don't know.
Superman, the one.
Superman usually has his arms forward,
Oh,
doesn't he?
that's right. I think so.
And that's another variation that so when you're working on your most basic like alignment classes, for example, a lot of teachers teach this. All right, so it's not the full thing, but you're using the same muscles. You're just strengthening them, one at a time, rather than doing the whole thing. So that's usually what I associate with Superman. Sound good? All right, so the next posture we're going to practice is another downward facing back bend. It's Dhanurasana. If you'll all come down into Sphinx pose, you've got your chest propped up over your elbows. And be sure that your shoulders stack over your elbows. If they're too far back, it's hard to support yourself. Now we're just going to warm up the quads a little bit more. So you'll lean onto your left side, bend your right knee, and reach back for the big toe side of your right foot. Good. Keep your chest low so you're not crunching your back. And press your right hip crease down into the floor, almost like you could flatten it out. And for most of us, this is where we stay. You're already feeling a stretch in your back and then the top of that right quad. Some of you can press gently on your right heel, bringing it down towards the outer edge of your right hip. And then if you want to add a shoulder stretch, you pivot your fingertips out and then forward. So the elbow points up, fingertips point forward. Good. Now it's okay with me for you to drop your chest as much as you need to, so there's no tension in the low back. You're already in a back bend on that right side. Helps if you point your nose down. Good. Keep pressing down into that right quad.
I feel bad for anyone who went biking yesterday.
Probably just you.
Did you go back?
No, Anna did. She was telling us at lunch about how she did 11
Well, she's
miles.
looking good over there, though. I'm gonna go ahead and release.
You should see my handstand, I mean.
I'm
I'm not letting it get me down.
That's it, girl. You just keep your chin up. You got 8 more months to go.
Look at me. All I need is wheels on this thing.
I should have brought your guitar. You can see
Stop being funny.
Are you showing this video to Grace? Good, and then release that left foot. Stack your hands, ground your forehead, just give your back a break. Good, so that was a little bit deeper, and if you feel some residual tension in your low back, like those muscles are having a hard time letting go, give your hips a shimmy from side to side. We've all done this in class, and it always feels really awkward the first time, but it feels really good. Good.
What about neck tweaking? I feel like my neck got tweaked from it. Maybe it was because I laughed and turned my head.
Might have been. So you can do that thing where you roll your head from side to side. Yeah, so again, sometimes these muscles just tense up and they forget how to let go, and that's why we wiggle around all the time. So we're just like, okay, wiggle it out, right?
Stop having fun.
Yeah, yoga should be no fun ever.
Yeah.
And no cursing, okay?
No cursing or laughing.
We have already messed that one up.
We need pool rules on the wall. No glass, no cursing, no laughing.
All right, so we're moving into Dhanurasana now. You'll bend both knees. And let's start by reaching back for the pinky toe sides of the feet. So your hand will wrap around the outsides of your ankles. Now start with your forehead on the floor. Squeeze your knees together and press your pubic bone down. Good. Keep that action as you start to lift your heels towards the ceiling. Don't lift up to your highest point. Good. Be sure that your glutes are engaged. Pelvis pressing down into the mat, tailbone reaching towards the backs of your knees. Great, you guys. These all look awesome. Imagine you're squeezing a block between your thighs. And on your next exhalation, deeply bend your knees. Release down to your left cheek. Unclasp your feet. Let your shoulders just round towards the floor. Good. And take those deep belly breaths. Nice. So it's helpful to do those quad stretches so that you can more easily make that connection with your ankles. Most of us have really tight quads.
Is it bad for your knees to have this go out?
So you want to try to keep your ankle as much in line over your knee as possible. It's not going to break your knee, I don't think.
Well, that's what I was thinking, but like the hero pose and the stretch we just did, like,
So it's fine as long as your knee stays in line with your hip. It's when your knee starts moving out to the side, and then you start taking it wide, that your hip and your knee get all torqued up. But as long as, so it's a difference between this and that. You see the difference? This is rough on your back. This is much safer.
what's safe for you?
This, safer. That's your alignment, so knee in line with the hip, as much as possible. You know, some people are going to go a little bit wider, but you just don't want to be, you know, as much as you can keep your knee in line with your hip, that's where you want to be. Does that make sense? Kind of. All right, so the next variation we're going to do in Dhanurasana is a little bit more opening for the shoulders. You'll bend your knees and reach back for the big toe sides of your feet. Good. Notice here how your, let's see, your pelvis wants to come up off the floor, your knees want to go wide. Bring your knees together. Again, they don't have to touch, but they're moving in that direction. Good. Reach your toes towards the back of the mat. Good. Keep pressing your pubic bone down so the glutes are engaged. Then lift the heels up. Good. Maybe reach the toes back. Well, somebody got a little chiropractic adjustment over here. The nose points down, that opens the airway in the back of your throat, so it's easier to breathe. Good, glutes are still working. And release to your right cheek, shoulders round. Good, take deep, relaxed breaths. Notice your heartbeat, and notice if you're starting to feel warm. And then walking your hands in, so they're right under your shoulders. Lift yourself up to all fours. And then slowly, as slow as you can, move back to child's pose. Good. Yeah. So you notice how moving slowly just gives those muscles some time to adjust. If you try to just shoot yourself back there, that's when you pull something. So moving slowly to counter pose. Good. And we'll take a couple of twists just to help circulate some blood back into these back muscles. Walk your hands back a little bit. Keep your hips on your heels. Good. And we'll do thread the needle in the child's pose shape. So you'll bring your left shoulder down to the floor. And release towards your left ear. And then drag your right hand back. Point your elbow towards the ceiling. So the right hand is directly beneath the right elbow. Yeah, and then press gently into that right hand, like you're going to roll your right shoulder over your left. Good. Take 2 more breaths low into your belly.
Do I keep my buttocks to my heels?
Yeah, towards your heels.
2 separate words.
Mystic commentary.
I know that you're like channeling your Forrest Gump there.
It's Alabama in me.
I know it. All right, you guys go ahead and come back to center. Both arms reach forward. Good, and then walk the hands back. Thread your right shoulder under. Point your left elbow towards the ceiling, wrist under the elbow. And then slowly roll your left shoulder over your right.
What was the answer to that question?
Text towards the heels, yes.
Okay, so
Yeah.
trying to keep them.
Yeah, so you get a little bit more length in your back if you keep your hips in this child's pose shape.
Yeah.
A lot of times when we do thread the needle with your buttocks up in the back, we tend to arch the back. And that's Sorry, you're the only dude in the room.
He's not a dude.
Walk your hands out. Oh, come on back to seated on your heels. Good. So does everybody feel pretty good about Dhanurasana? So what I should have had you do when we warmed up was some of these forward folds with the palms interlaced behind your back, because a lot of people are tight in that space in their shoulders. It's really hard for most of us to just reach back there first thing during the day and interlace the hands. So in order to get into this shape, if you think about it, your shoulders have to be open. We did a little bit, right? But a lot of people have trouble making this connection in the first place. So it's important to give them something like this shape, just one side at a time, rather than reaching back there first thing with both hands. When you're teaching those more advanced classes and those students are used to doing the postures, it's a little bit more accessible. But when you're first starting and with beginner students, give them as many sort of warm-up postures as you can. Give them as many different parts of the pose you want to teach before you put them into the whole thing. Cool?
I love that, Kate. I've never had anybody do the
Oh,
one
yeah.
side. That
Yeah.
felt really
It's
great.
very
This
considerate
thing.
of you.
Thank you.
Yeah,
My
because
teachers.
pose. Some people, now their knees weren't splaying out in bow pose.
Mm-hmm.
Those knees look good. But some people's toes were touching. It doesn't seem like that would make,
In bow pose, if toes are together, like this.
yeah.
So this is fine as long as there's some action of the knees moving together.
Yeah, the
It's
knees
when the
looked
knees
good,
get
yeah.
wide that
Uh-huh.
it gets dangerous for your back.
Right.
And do you guys get that idea of the sacrum crunching when you open your knees? Let's all do
Yeah.
this. Lie down on your back, just like I did before. Separate your heels so they're as wide as your mat. Bring your knees together. And you can feel the bottom edge of your sacrum pretty flat into the floor. I mean, I've got a pretty heavy arch in my low back, and even I get pretty flat here. You guys feel that? You know where your sacrum is?
Mhm.
Yeah, okay, cool. Now, bring your feet together. Good. Let your belly be engaged as you separate your knees. And you'll feel that connection change. For some of you, it'll lift all the way up. For some of you, you'll feel like you're kind of on one corner. Does anybody not feel the difference? Okay, awesome. So that's back bending. This is a back bend with the knees wide. With knees together, it's more of a grounding posture. Good. So go ahead and bring your knees back together. Give your back a little break. Good. Does that make sense to you?
Yeah, I think I should try that. I wanna understand, I mean, I'm,
Go ahead.
Usually.
I just wanna do the sacrum thing, cause I wanna understand why it does that. What are we doing?
So start with your knees together, feet wide.
Knees together, feet wide, okay.
And feel the bottom edge of your sacrum. How
Yeah.
it's pretty flat and connected with the floor.
Right.
So this is what it feels like when your knees are moving together for those back bends that we do on the
Okay.
belly or anywhere really. Now if you bring your feet together
Feet together.
and separate your knees, you'll feel yourself moving into more of a back bend where you're either lifting up onto the corner of your sacrum or you'll feel it lift all the way up off the floor.
Okay. And when you're doing Dhanurasana, you don't want that to happen?
Exactly.
Because it's not protecting you as much, I think.
Exactly.
You feel that squeeze.
And there's all kinds of ways, and we'll get into this in some of these other back bends, all kinds of ways of binding yourself up with straps and blocks and back bends to prevent your knees from splaying out to the side. So,
Well, I have a question. So if mine, I know I'm probably one of those. I'm kind of glad that you're able to look at us. That's really nice. Because I probably am really out there. But what would I do if that's the only way I can reach my feet?
is to let your knees come apart.
Mm-hmm.
So that's fine as long as you are actively engaging your muscles in towards the midline. If you can, if you can't keep your knees all the way together and reach your feet, it's fine to do this. But when you start lifting up, don't let your knees go further out. Keep actively moving in. That way you're using your hips to help stabilize the low part of your back, rather than just taking it into the biggest arch you can possibly get into. Does that make sense?
And I guess
You
my
can
other-
also practice this. That's
Oh,
awkward.
that one thing.
Squeezing that block. And you can do it too at the wider level. Sorry, you guys. So if it's easier to reach like this.
And just not
Squeeze
come up
it.
as far, obviously. Just keep it. a
Yeah,
little
if you
bit
try to
down.
lift too far up, you're going to lose it.
Mhm.
So as high as you can go while you're squeezing that block.
Okay, great.
That makes sense?
It might just be from sitting all weekend, but it was very uncomfortable for my knees the whole time.
What was Dhanurasana? Yeah, it might be from sitting. You might just have some tightness there. Also, if your quads are tight, that's going to pull on your knees a little bit. So just warming up as much as you can. That thing we did lying on our belly. You can do the same thing standing up. If you want your students to focus, it's a balancing pose. You get this shoulder stuff too. But it's also a matter of engaging in the right places. Again, so here, I kind of hang out in this shape. My belly's not working, my hip's not working, but I'm gonna find a deeper stretch if I suck my belly in and point my tailbone down. That's when I'm really gonna feel it in that knee, moving down into where the quadriceps attach to the knee. Sound good? All right, so we're gonna move on to our backs. Do some work on bridge pose. And here's where we're gonna start with the blocks. So go ahead and lie down on your backs.
Yeah.
Be sure you've got a block within reach. Good. Bend your knees back, walk your heels back. Yeah. Good, now go ahead and take that block, set it up right in between your knees. And you want the thinnest edge of the block between your legs, yeah. Good, so alignment here is super important. Be sure that if you reach down with your fingertips, you can just barely graze the backs of your heels. That means that your heels are directly beneath your knees. Good. All right, find find the big toe sides of your feet. So you want to press down into the inner edges of your legs. That's going to engage your hips. And on your next inhalation, lift your hips up. Keep squeezing the block between your legs. Good, so squeezing that block again is engaging the hips to support the low back. If your knees were to flail out to the sides, that's when your sacrum gets crunched up into your body. So just take about 2 more breaths here. Find your glutes. Use your glutes to lift your tailbone towards the backs of your knees. You'll feel more of a stretch in those psoas muscles, less of an arch in the back. Good, now go ahead and release back down to your back. Good, keep the block between your legs, and if you've got space, stretch your arms overhead. If not, you can bend your elbows into like a cactus shape. Good, so a lot of us teach multiple back bends in classes. Sarla always says they're like pancakes. They never turn out right the first time. We always like to do 3 or 4. And this is a good counter pose. So you hear teachers a lot of times say resist the tendency to curl up into a little ball right when you come out of the back bend. That's the same idea for your muscles. You want to give them sort of a neutral moment to come back before you start stretching back out. So go ahead and take your arms along down your sides. Good, press into your big toes. Squeeze the block with your knees. On your next inhalation, lift your hips. This time, interlace your palms behind your back, if that's available to you. If it doesn't feel good on your shoulders, you don't have to do it. Good, now really focus on the large muscle groups on the back plane of your body. So not your back muscles, your glutes and your hamstrings. The more you use your legs, the higher those hips will go. Yeah, you'll feel the stretch in the quadricep muscles, the hip flexor. And you get a little Brazilian butt lift. I mean, bikini season's coming. Good, the longer you hold this pose, the more heat you'll feel building in your butt. Let's take 2 more breaths.
Look at you timing us.
And then slowly release. Unclasp your hands, hips to the floor, stretch your arms overhead.
And resist going into a ball?
Yeah, resist going into a ball. So what's happening when you're in the back bend, your muscles are flexed, right? They're squeezing and engaging. And if you are to release that and go straight into a ball, your muscles have to kind of rip apart to get into that full stretch. So you've got flexion when you're in a back bend, and you're stretching when you're in the forward fold or in the curled up into the ball. So you want to just take a second at neutral to give your muscles a second to relax. Then you can curl up in a little ball and kind of roll around. So if y'all want to do that now, you can lose your block, set it off to the side. Yeah, curl your knees in and just roll around here.
How much time should you give yourself before you want to?
Just a couple of breaths.
Okay.
Yeah, they react pretty quickly. And you'll see your students too. If they're moving really slowly, it's because their muscles are still kind of coming back. It's like when you are sitting down for a long period of time and then you get up and it takes you a second, like you've got to move slow, like,
Getting out of the car.
you know, you have those like old lady moments from time to time where you're like, oh, you know, I've just been here for too long. All right, so go ahead and bring your feet back down to the floor. And we'll just do one more supported bridge pose. So you should have your block close by. Good, set up your feet so you've got your knees lined up over your heels. Good, now imagine that you're squeezing that block between your knees. You'll feel the big toes pressing into the mat. Lift your hips. Slide your block on the lowest level underneath your hips. Good, this is probably the most common form of bridge pose that I teach. It's almost effortless. So your hips can come down into that block. You want to find your sacrum, so you want to find that sort of bony plate almost fully connected with the block. And then for a lot of us, you'll already feel some sensation on the tops of your legs, the psoas and the hip flexors. If that's the case, then stay here on the lowest level. Some of you might feel good actually turning the block up a level and taking that back bend a little bit deeper. And I always encourage students to adjust the block. So rarely on the first time do you find that sweet spot right where your back feels nice and flat and connected. Sometimes you just need to pick your hips up, move the block up or down, and find a position that feels a little bit better. Good. Now in this supported posture, let's focus a little more on the breath. Go ahead and close your eyes. And just like you did at the beginning of your practice, focus on drawing your breath into the upper portion of your chest. Feel the top of your lungs expanding, the collarbones expanding. Think about all that energy swirling around your heart center. The Anahata chakra, if you guys have talked about your chakras yet. And this is the space that we're taught is responsible for compassion and for emotional balance. So when you're resting in these supported postures, it's helpful to give yourself something to think about. Thinking about why are you practicing this pose? Just give yourself a few more breaths here with the hips elevated. You're actually in an inversion here. Hips over the level of the heart. And pressing down into your big toes. Lift your hips up. Slide the block to the side and try to lower down one vertebra at a time, bringing your waist to the floor before your hips. Good. And be mindful of your neighbor. Please stretch your legs forward. Stretch your arms overhead or goalpost or that full body stretch. I'm going to go ahead and curl your knees in towards your chest and roll around from side to side.
Why do you try to bring your waist to the floor before your hips?
So that is helpful in finding space between your vertebrae. So if you think about lowering down one vertebra at a time, you're getting the full extension in your spine as you lower down. A lot of times we'll just plop the hips right back down and then we've already got this natural curve happening in the back. Your muscles don't get a chance to decompress. Does that make sense? So by lowering down one vertebra at a time, your low back gets longer.
You're rolling it down.
Yeah, whereas if you just drop your hips to the floor, you've still got some arch happening there. All right, so roll over to one side. Lift yourself up to seated. And I'm going to demo just one more variation that we teach on this pose. And this is really helpful for students who can't quite interlace their palms behind the back. So if you've got any sort of shoulder injury or just tightness happening there, you'll find that it's pretty common that students can't quite do it. So same thing here, you're pressing into your big toes, you lift your hips up, find your glutes, scoop your tailbone towards the backs of your knees, and then here you just bend the elbows. Palms face one another, you've got the backs of your arms to press down into the floor. Now, even if you can't interlace your hands behind your back, students might be able to press down into the elbows, lift the back of the chest, and bring those shoulder blades a little closer together. So here, they're getting more of a stretch in the shoulders without having to interlace the palms. So this is what will happen a lot of times, or it looks kind of like this. And I don't want you to come into this shape, but I can feel that third, I think it's my C3, or whichever one's the most susceptible. That C7. I can feel that kind of poking into the floor, and that's what you want to avoid. You want the space between your shoulder blades to be nearly lifted away from the ground if you can. So you guys see how that's just a little bit more accessible than this? That look, it just feels a little bit awkward. It's really tight, and it's hard to breathe here because the shoulders want around. Whereas if you can bring fingertips up and then press back, then you have all this space to breathe, right?
Debbie calls that retro robot arms.
Retro robot. Awesome. So that's what I'll start calling it. Now that I know that that's the, classic definition of that posture.
Sanskrit.
Retro robot, asana. All right, does that make sense? Okay, so the second to the last back bend that we're going to work on is full wheel. And I'm going to demonstrate with all these props. So, this is the one everybody hates. Binding yourself up in this strap to keep your elbows from splaying out to the side. Same thing happens with the elbows. that happens in the knees. This will all make more sense in a second. So, you'll have your students take a strap, make a loop, and then you want the loop to be no wider than your shoulders. I need to tighten mine up a little bit. Yeah, you guys can go ahead and work on this. Good, so you actually want to be able to press out into the strap without your elbows going any wider than your shoulders. So it might even feel like it's a little bit more narrow. And I've got the strap just above my elbows. I'm pretty sure that's where it's supposed to go. You might want to bring yours in a little bit tighter. So while y'all are working on your straps, I'm going to set up just like before with the block between my knees, heels underneath the knees. And then for here, you're setting up for full wheel. So this is why nobody likes it, because you feel like you're in a straight jacket a little bit. Now, there's a lot of different things that students do with their hands in the full wheel posture. For me, I know I've got some tightness in my shoulders that prevent my arms from stretching this way. So I take a little external rotation. It's fine for your fingertips to turn out, but you don't want your elbows to turn out. So that's the point of the strap. And then from here, you've sort of got your props to keep you in good alignment. So you're squeezing your block between your knees. You lift your hips just like bridge pose, find the glutes. Then from here, you come to the top of your head. This is when you'll really start to feel your strap. Elbows no wider than the shoulders. As you lift your chest away from the floor. Now, it's important to find the feet here and reach your chest towards the wall that you're looking at. Well, not very warm. So to come down, lower to the back of your head, and then just take a break. Now, here's the tendency that happens in these poses. So people just really think about flinging themselves up here. They've got their feet real wide, they'll lift their hips, the sacrum's all crunched, they'll lift their shoulders, elbows are really wide, and then the other thing is that the heels turn in and the knees go wide. So do you see that? This feels really yucky in my shoulders and in my back. So I'm going to think about sending my heels straight back from my toes, pressing into the big toes to reach the chest back. Really important to find those legs. And then using the strength of the arms to keep the chest lifted. And then to come down, it's lower the chin to the chest, keep the elbows no wider than the shoulders as you lower back down. And then you take a breath in that full extension. Sorry, I thought I lost a nipple for a second. All right, and then if you want, you can curl up. So if any of you want to try full wheel today, it's totally up to you. If you want to be a spectator, then you can all watch him. Oh, thank you.
They won't look as pretty as yours.
I did
Now they're covered the block. I highly doubt you hold the block next time.
So maybe just try it. If you drop it, don't worry about it.
Can you do it long way?
I think a little bit narrower.
Bridge.
Good. Yeah, straps look good. Cool, we got a lot of takers.
I won't be able to do it.
So it's totally fine too, before you guys get back there, it's totally fine to come here. All right, so then you're already sort of working on getting the arms, but you don't have to quite use them yet. You're sort of in bridge pose. Does that make sense? And then you come down, it's just chin to the chest and hips to the floor.
So it's just hands but beside the head.
Mm-hmm.
They're just level with it.
Pretty much, it's bridge pose with your hands planted, and maybe the head lifts, maybe it doesn't. Yeah, it should feel awkward. If the strap feels awkward, you're doing it right. All right, so walk your feet back. Now we've all got that strap in place. Nobody's thinking about your feet.
You're not
Place your hands at either side of your ears. Nice, Haley.
You're gonna get a neck stretch.
Yeah.
You go.
Hey, will you spot someone or something?
Yeah.
Meaning me.
Good, so you guys feel free to lift up on your own. So find your feet, just lift your hips, and then come to the top of your head.
Scared.
I got you.
I'm so
I'm gonna come this way.
Okay.
Just down. Good, you just stay right there. Think about elbows together, squeezing your block. Good. You can actually walk your feet a little more forward. So what's happening is you were sort of on the ball of your foot there. You really want to be able to press down into your heel, and that's going to engage those bigger muscles in your legs to lift the hips. Yeah.
Well, you gotta push your chest this way. So Kate, if we're not doing what you were saying, if the legs aren't activated, are we gonna feel that twinge in the mid back or the low back?
I usually feel it in my low back, but that's where my tension is anyways.
Yeah.
So it really depends on your body. You know?
And then when you turn, I mean, because when you're telling us to activate our legs, it does really swing your chest that way.
Mhm.
She said that's okay though. Oh, okay, okay.
Why would that hurt my knees?
I think you had your knees a little too far flexed. Like I said, your heels were way, way back. Bring your heels a little bit more forward.
This way?
Yeah.
That's forward?
Yeah, walk your right foot back like half an inch. Yeah. Okay. Good, elbows together. Good. Now your heels are turning in a little bit. Yep, nice adjustment. And then press into your heels, reach your heart back, 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 back. Yeah, yeah. Good, and then come down. Nice. And it helps to talk to your students like that. Give them lots of energy. And then come down and rest and breathe.
How long do you hold a pose like that?
Not very long. Not very
Take a
long.
breath in and out.
Usually, I'll say take 2 more breaths, and most people are already coming down. So,
Breathe.
8 minutes. Yeah. It's usually like 3 or 4 breaths. People have a hard time learning how to breathe in that shape because you've got this thing happening in your neck, and you can hear it in my voice when I'm trying to talk like this. There's not a lot of space for your airflow to move. So, like I said, a lot of times people will come out of it on their own. I usually teach it for like 3 to 5 breaths, and then come on down. Cool. All right, so there's 2 other ways I want to teach this full wheel. These guys, you're done. And people love this. I very rarely do it in my classes. But you need the block, you need the wall, and you need 2 blocks. And this is crazy because it looks like a bigger back bend, but it's actually a whole lot more accessible for a lot of people. So I'm going to take the blocks, long edge of the block against the wall. Good, and then from here you set up, I'm like, good, Kate, you're doing great. Now here you set up with the heels of your hands on the block, and I think students love this because you get leverage. You're not having to press your hands down, your shoulders aren't in quite such an awkward position. Here you've got leverage, like I can really press into my hands and use the wall. So legs are really important, that's where the foundation comes from. You're lifting the hips, finding the glutes, coming to the top of the head. And then from here, it's just easier to find the hands, whatever those are. Lift yourself up. And you're actually, it looks like more of a back bend, but your hands are higher, so it's a little bit less. And then the idea here is to reach your chest towards the wall. So again, taking that arch out of the low part of your back and taking it into the upper part of your spine. That actually feels really good.
Can you
And then it
scratch
comes
your head
down.
with your foot?
What'd you say?
Can you scratch your head with your foot?
What'd you eat for lunch?
I don't think so. So if anybody wants to try that, it felt really nice for me. You might want to try it with your shoulder. My shoulder felt great.
Yeah.
Me and Katie have a lot of the same shoulder stuff happening. So I'll talk you through it for anybody that wants to do it. Again, it's just an option. You lie down on your back. Yep, you want the long edge of your block connected with the wall.
You can
And leave enough space in between for the top of your head.
I saved another block.
Okay.
Then you're using all the props and everything.
All right, walk
I'm
your
trying to
feet
set a
back.
record
Sit
for
right
number of
underneath your
yoga
heels.
mats used.
And reach back with your hands, bring the heel of your hand to the block. Let your fingers point down towards the floor, even your thumb. Yeah. Squeeze your elbows towards one another so they're no wider than the shoulder. So come away from the wall a little bit. Good. Now put your head on the floor. Good. Reach back with your hands. Yep. And then turn them the other way. So your fingers point towards your feet.
I brought my head back because it just, I thought it was gonna knock my chin, because I've got this.
Good, and then feel how you kind of press back. Bring your elbows together. There you go.
Twist them.
You got, see if you can point your thumbs down.
Will you tell me if my feet lay out or?
Did you feel like you're hitting your forehead?
Wants you like a hawk now.
Yeah, that's
I know,
it.
but I'm not doing anything.
You're doing it.
Good, and the elbows come together. So natural to me. But it looks great.
Thanks, cheerleader.
Nice, you guys. Now find your feet. Reach your
Oh, I
chest
just
back
got
towards the
that.
wall.
You're probably gonna take your heels forward a little bit, Bracken.
Yeah, look at you.
That's
One more
good.
elbow towards your knees. Just pinch your butt.
Okay, you just lay your right foot out.
Right? I mean,
Yeah.
students love this. It
There you
feels
go.
really good. Bracken, that looks great.
Yeah,
Yeah, you really got your legs there, both of you guys.
awesome.
Good. The noise is just, an extra.
Sound effects.
Yeah. Good. All right, and then the last one is just to turn around and do the opposite. I don't know what the deal is with toes, but people like to curl their toes up against the wall. You know, yogis, we're all obsessed with our feet. It's like we want our face up in our feet all the time. So here you curl your toes up against the wall. This is where you really start working on your legs. Hands plant, elbows come together. Use your glutes to lift your hips. Use your hands, lift your head. Now here's what happens. We want to hold all of our weight in our feet. So our knees hit the wall. So the idea here is to bring your knees away from the wall, and that's where you start to feel your back bend in the upper part of your chest. Does that make sense? So resist knees towards the wall. It's kind of tough on the wrist. And bring knees away.
You're so cute, Kate.
It's gonna be so bad for my ego. All right, so if anybody wants to try that, it's just another option.
Brain works like
Lie
that.
down on your back, curl your toes against the wall, and make your toenail polish.
Hey, that's something you sleep.
Yeah,
It's
I
like
like your
gun
toenail
metal.
polish
Yeah.
too, yeah.
Do you think that one's too much for the bad wrist issues not to try that
If
one?
you've got back issues,
Wrist.
have
Is that one feel
you
like
ever tried turning your fingertips out a little bit?
No.
Try that. Just try. I promise I'm gonna give y'all lots of time to unwind. Nice, Haley. Good. Now try and bring your knees further away from the wall. Yeah. Oh yeah.
Oh my gosh.
That's
Wow.
really
I can get up on
nice.
this one.
I'm like, what?
I think the turning my hands out feels a lot better.
Yeah. So again, you can turn your hands out, just don't let the elbows go out. And you guys are all doing a really good job of that. But it's all about, your shoulder won't rotate in that direction anyways.
What do you mean by that, Kate? Your hand
It
out?
won't roll out.
Turn your fingertips out, just like that.
Like that?
Maybe a little more towards the back of the mat.
All of it.
There, more
Yeah,
that way?
like that. Mhm.
Weird.
Good, bring them in a little bit closer. Yes.
I don't even know how to push up from there.
So start with your legs, just lift your hips. Good, then find your hands and find the top of your head.
I don't have any strength there.
There you go. Let me look at this for a second. So mine, okay, I had you turn it on the wrong way. So rather than straight out to the sides, bring them forward, but not fingertips under the shoulders. So you're at about 45 degrees. Does that make sense?
No, but
More like your thumb under your shoulders, but your fingers splayed out to the side.
Yeah. Yeah.
Maybe a little bit
Kind of
more
like that,
towards-
but more
Towards Kate a little bit more.
that way. Does that feel like you've got more strength there?
I don't know yet.
So just start with your legs, okay? Not happening there either. So it's just it's probably just a structural thing then. Some way that your shoulder is built, you've got to find whatever rotation works to find leverage in your shoulder. And it might just feel different.
That's cool.
That's cool.
I have a question.
Yeah.
If you were planning your class and you wanted wheel to be your peak pose, it would be a good peak pose, right?
It'd be a great peak pose.
Would you do, you know how you can do Vasyastasana and you can do that bend like from it?
Wild thing.
Yeah.
That'd
Would that
be
be
a
a
good
good
one.
one leading up like to do more toward the beginning?
Yeah, or that could, that could also be sort of a peak thing. I wouldn't do it like way in the beginning because that posture, so she's talking about this version of Vasisthasana, and then you step 1 foot back, this is what you're talking about, right? That requires so much opening in this shoulder that I would be sure to do a lot of like these forward folds and Shalambhasana with all that opening in the chest first. So you don't want it to be like your first warm-up posture, but it would be good to sequence in with Dhanurasana because you're using a lot of the same muscles. You gotta use the leg that's bent to help lift the hips, use the glutes to lift the tailbone, the opening in the shoulder. It's a great one to throw in there. Any questions about Dhanurasana? Awesome. So, and then you guys know there's some different some different variations that you can do on that pose too. So, if you've got a lot of students that just love full wheel, then have them like step 1 foot in, lift 1 leg up. You're like, yeah, a bunch of students that love that posture.
A lot of people do the push-ups too. We do that in Ashtanga.
Nice. I don't know, I've never taught that in my classes.
Going up and down and up.
Yeah.
You just bend the elbows and lift back up. Mm-hmm.
In the Ashtanga, I think you're supposed to touch your head to the mat 5 times before you come down from it.
Ah, yeah. It's a big strengthener. And then strengthening in that vulnerable position too is going to get really deep into your shoulder sockets, work a lot around your triceps and your biceps. I can imagine why that's awesome. You just have to have a really good understanding of the foundation of that pose before you try wiggling around in it. You know what I mean? Like you don't want to lift 1 leg until you've got a really good feel for the floor underneath both of your feet, right? Because what happens is we shift our weight to one side, you twinge one side of your back, and then you're messed up for like a week, or longer. Okay, so last back bend that we're going to work on is Ustrasana. And this is another one that you can do with lots of props. We've already done, I think, enough with the strap. So you can also use the strap around your thighs. Because like I said, the knees kind of want to splay out to the side. That crunches your back. So you can do the same thing, and you guys don't have to do this. You can do the same thing here. Just cinching the strap enough so that your knees can't go any wider than your hips. Does that make sense? I don't know. Are you guys all familiar with this camel pose? Standing on the knees, okay. Alright. So, using the strap or not, you come up onto your knees so that they're no wider than your hips. I usually teach it with blocks because that's sort of the gentlest version of this pose, and it's not a gentle back bend. This is one that you don't want to sub for like Shalambhasana. This is more of a full wheel or a Dhanurasana. It's exactly the same shape as Dhanurasana. But you've got gravity working in a different way, so you're less grounded in this posture. You've got to use a little bit more support from your belly to support your low back. So the way that I teach this posture is just to start with palms together at the heart. Find lots of length in your spine, so resist this thing. Tailbone down, breastbone up. And then I like to just lean back and lean forward. And lean back. And this is a lot of work. I mean, you're sore the next day. The quads are working and the belly's working. So you want to kind of keep your body in a straight line, right? Diagonal line. And then the last time you just pause, think about reaching the tailbone down as you lift the breastbone up. So it's not this, it's this. Y'all see the difference? Mm-hmm. And then one arm comes back. And then I like to sweep like this big exaggerated open. So you get all this opening in the shoulder and do the second side. And then to come up, chin to the chest, engage the belly and try to float up evenly. All right? You want to resist this if at all possible, because that's when you get one side of your back. And that's really focusing on strengthening the belly to use that to come up. All right? And then the second time, you can give students the option to lower the blocks, or they can actually reach for their feet. All right? And we'll all do this together in a second. The last thing would be to reach back with both hands. So it's the same thing. You lean forward, lean back, you pause, tailbone towards the knees, the breastbone lifts. And then you've got to keep the belly strong, breastbone lifted. Oops, to take those hands back. All right, once you find your feet, shoulder blades come together, chest rolls up, chin rolls back. Again, Again, this is tough for a lot of students. It's hard to breathe. It helps just to point your nose up towards the ceiling. And then to come out, it's chin to the chest. Engage strongly through the belly. Lift up evenly. And then I usually just sit back on the knees, rest here and breathe. All right? So let's all try Ustrasana. You have the option to use that strap just if you've never tried it before. And let's all start with the blocks on the highest level at either side of your ankles. Good. Join your palms together at your hearts. Good. Alignment looks good. I'm all. All right. Now point your tailbone towards your knees. Lift your breastbone towards your thumbs. Keep your spine as tall as possible. Lean back about 20 degrees. Nice, you guys. And then come back forward. Good. And then lean back again. Tailbone down. Good. Come forward. Good. Last time, you'll pause leaning back. Good. Lift your breastbone. Sink your tailbone. Perfect. Right hand to the block. And then circle the left arm back. Big opening in that shoulder. Really nice. Good. Draw the shoulder blades towards one another.
I got another one.
Maybe point the nose up. Maybe roll the chin back. It's up to you.
How are our hands? I feel like I'm not.
So usually the fingertips wrap around the outsides of the block.
Just, I feel like I don't have that, like,
So try.
emotion.
All right, you guys, chin to your chest. Engage the belly. Come up evenly. Good. Now just sit down on your heels. Take a breath there. Give your back a second. So her question is, what way do your hands rotate when you place your hands on your blocks? For the most flexible shoulders, they turn all the way back. So your fingertips point towards the back of the mat. And for people like me, fingertips point towards the outer edge of the mat. So you might play around with that on your second round. Go ahead and turn your blocks down a notch if you feel okay with that. And then come on back to seated on the, or standing on the knees. All right, join your hands at your heart. Lift your breastbone and sink your tailbone. Good. Keep your glutes engaged as you lean back. Good. Tailbone down, breastbone up. Just a reminder. Good. Now left hand to the block. And then circle the right arm back. Yeah, that's it, Cate. Now tailbone towards the floor. Breastbone towards the ceiling. Maybe the nose points up. Maybe the chin rolls back. Good. Just 2 more breaths. And then chin to your chest. Engage your belly. Try to come up evenly. And then sit down on your heels. Place your hands over your heart and close your eyes. Good. Feel your heart beating behind your chest. Notice the physical effects of that posture. And then last round, and it's totally up to you. If you're done with back bends, stay right here, hips on the heels. If you want to release that strap, give yourself a little freedom. For those of you that want to try one more round, feel free to use your blocks if that's what's working best for you. If you really want to move deep, then you'll untuck your feet and move your blocks off to the sides.
And are you supposed to feel like when we come down like this, are we just supposed to? I guess that
So
instruction's
there will be a
confusing.
little bit of an arch that happens as you reach back, but you want to resist throwing the hips forward. So there's a difference between supporting your back as you lean back and not supporting the back and just sort of collapsing in the belly. Does that make sense? So it's really easy to reach here, but it feels really yucky on my back. So then the idea is to reach the tailbone down, try to find some length there, and then focus on that upper part of the chest. And then to come up, it's belly to the spine, and you try to float up evenly. All right, so those of you trying one more round, it's standing on the knees, knees no wider than the hips. Join your palms. Good, lengthen up through your breastbone. Reach your tailbone down and start to lean back. So you want to feel the quads working. Good, then you might release both hands at the same time. You might do one. Good, shoulder blades draw together. Good, press your tailbone forward. Good, maybe roll the head back. Good, be sure you can breathe, just one more breath. It's really nice, Bracken.
I think I'm confused about how
Your
you
chest. Come on up evenly.
forward and not your hips.
So it's a little bit of both. Usually the hips don't move. For me, tailbone reaching forward means squeeze your butt. For me, that's glutes. It's just engaging your bigger muscle groups. It seems to me that you're pretty flexible in your low back, so your hips might actually move forward. Then the idea is to not collapse in your low back. Does that make sense? So again, it's the difference, like I'll do it in bridge pose. The difference is between this and that. That and that.
The second one's bad, or
This one's good.
that one's good?
This one, my glutes are working. Here, they're not. And this is all happening right here. That's where a lot of us already hold a lot of tension. And then for here, I'm taking the work into my legs. Does that make sense? Cool. Y'all done with back bends? I'm done with back bends. I mean, unless there's something else that you guys just really want to work on. It's not. Anybody want like drop back into back bend?
Yeah, I was gonna add, I mean, I can do it, but some of the things that I think I can do, I hear in class that you shouldn't really do, so I was gonna ask you, was it okay to do walkovers and back bends and standing up and stuff?
Totally, totally. As long as you feel safe in your body, and if you want to, you've got to keep in mind that it's a liability when you start teaching that stuff to other people. Grace is the only one that I really know of who teaches like handstand to back bend, and she uses like chairs and lots of props. So it really is up to your comfort level.
So
If it's-
like personal practice, it may not be something you would.
Yeah, I mean,
in
that's all
class.
you, girl. It's like, if you feel fine, if that feels good to you, then go for it. That's my opinion. And if it doesn't feel great to you, your body will let you know and you'll learn a lesson. I mean, that's been my experience,
Can you do that thing where you do the like full wheel up the wall, you walk up the wall, and then like flip over?
fun.
And then flip over.
It looks like so much fun, and I hear it's actually easier than it looks, and I love to learn how to do that.
I have done that before.
Like a back walkover?
It is like a back walkover. Well, I'll try it. I might
pretty.
just.
I bet Haley can do it.
Yeah, that's how Haley got out of bed.
So my would be to keep your butt as close to the wall as possible so that once you get up there, you've got some leverage. All right? And you've just got to be able to kick off the wall.
Okay.
Yeah. And that's not, that's just something that I've played around with on my own. So I'm not going to teach you how to teach that. But that's what it looks like.
Thanks for the tease.
And I was in a class of Grace's recently where she taught dropping back into back bend. And she, she had us start back against the wall and you use the block, you use the wall to walk back. Now, the idea here is to let your knees bend. If you try to go straight back, you're going to feel like you can't reach the wall. However, when you start to bend your knees, that's when you find that connection. You walk the hands down, go way too close.
Wow.
And then you walk the hands back up. And so that's how you start practicing it. My hair's just falling down. And then would you mind being a demo for me?
Sure. I haven't done it before though, but I'll try.
Has anybody practiced walking down the wall or?
I can.
Okay, let me try Haley. So, come on and stand up with your feet on your mat. And this is just a good way to help assist so that your students aren't crunching in their back. You've already got your strap because you've had everybody bound up in a straight jacket. And I'm just going to take this around the low part of her sacrum. Does that feel pretty good to you? All right. So separate your feet so they're about as wide as your hips. Good, bring your palms together at your heart, just like you do for Ustrasana. Good, now she's going to start to lean back, lift her chest. Good, send your tailbone down. Good, and then she'll start to bend her knees. Now I'm pulling on this strap to keep her tailbone reaching forward. You can start to release her hands back. And I'm just going to carefully lower her down. Then once she gets here, I can actually pull on this strap and give her a nice adjustment. So you see how her buttocks flesh is kind of moving towards the backs of her knees? And then if she wants to, you can come back up. I'm going to pull on the strap. Oh, she didn't even need me. Nice and tall. Nice. Anybody else want to try it?
That felt like better for my butt to go that way.
Yeah, it's a really nice adjustment. It feels really good. And it's actually, for those of you that aren't used to moving from standing into back bend, it's a really safe way to do it. Have a partner or have Grace support your back with a strap. It's actually easier than walking down the wall because you've got somebody kind of, it's like a spot, right? It's as if I was underneath her back, like holding her back up, so she's not going to fall on her head. Not that she needed me anyway.
You think anybody could do that? Like, I'm probably the least flexible in this room.
I
with the
think
back.
that anyone who has a full wheel practice and who is who doesn't have like a fear issue. A lot of people, it's just like inversions. You're just not used to doing it. You know, it's hard to wrap your brain around. And so when you start doing that stuff for the first time, it's really sort of intimidating. Once you get comfortable with your body in that full wheel position, and then maybe, you know, grow some balls to like walk back down the wall, and then maybe, you know, dropping back with the strap. But I'll tell you, the strap feels a whole lot safer and easier and supported to me than me having to like use my own legs to do it. Cool? You want to practice?
Yes.
You want to do your back bend and walk over, or you want me to drop you back?
I would love to learn how to do that. My only concern is just I don't want to make too much of an impact on my wrist going over. This is my only.
How are your hands in full wheel? Are they straight back? You should be pretty well
I'm
set
pretty
up.
sure I can do it straight back, yeah.
Okay. Well, let me lower you down. Or no, you have to face the other way. All right. So I said I wouldn't teach this. You'll have to erase it from your video.
Okay. It's actually on my bucket list, so.
Oh my God.
All right, let's knock
The other one is going into a handstand from crow. But.
Oh, like.
I'll say one more.
That's later.
That's
That's arm balance day.
Yeah.
Come as close to the wall as you
Close
can.
Closer.
Yeah, this isn't going to feel like your most radiant full wheel. You're going to be kind of jumbled up. And you'll see why in a second. Bring your heels down. Okay, now find your full wheel.
Like that, close.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Okay.
Now, put one foot on the wall about hip level. Yeah, just find that foot. Good, now press into your hand, maybe the second leg lifts. And then you'll have to really kick off that foot.
You did it.
Yeah.
You need a tattoo.
Just now. All right, let's unwind. We've got 35 minutes to do some good restorative yoga. So we're just going to start with some twist. I really like thread the needle, so come on back to your hands and your knees.
Kate, your arms are a little bendy too at the elbow, huh?
I know, I try to do a little bend in the elbows.
Have you ever had any elbow problems?
No, it's just been my knees. Just my knees.
Yeah, okay.
All right, and just a couple of times sit back to child's pose with the arms reaching forward. And then inhale up to all fours. And just do that about 3 or 4 more times. You might notice some residual tension in your back after all those back bends. And that's okay, this is the only time that you're really going to have to do all of those in one class.
Okay, I'm so happy now.
That's another thing the back bends do. They get us really energized. So if you feel kind of giddy. And the next time you come up to all fours, you'll just pause there. Step your right hand out wide and thread your left arm through. This time you'll keep your booty up in the air. And find a little curl in your tailbone, like you're stretching it down towards the backs of your knees. Keep that action as you roll your right shoulder over the left. And this might feel really nice, taking the right arm towards the sky, and then stretching it forward, planting your palm all the way on the floor, facing the front of your mat. Yeah. Good. And then some folks like to kind of walk the right hand back towards the left to help open your chest towards the ceiling. Good. The right arm stays fully extended. Mm-hmm. Does this feel okay to bring it forward and down to the mat? And then the action is to press down and roll back. And then it's like space right here. Yes, yes, yes. Good. Just about 2 more breaths, yeah. And then a little more tailbone down. Belly up, tail down. Yeah, yeah.
Talking to me?
No, I'm talking to
Okay.
heart over here. All right, now drag your right hand back so it's right in front of your face. Please wait for an exhalation. Use the strength of your belly to help lift back up. All right, so we're all moving slow like old men. The next exhalation, sit back on your heels. And inhale right back up to fours. Good, do that twice more, nice and slow. And last round. Your next inhalation, pause in your all fours position. Step your left hand wide and spread your right arm through. Find length in the low back, stretching your tailbone towards your knees. Press gently into your left hand, roll the left shoulder over the right. Good, now keep that action as you stretch your left arm towards the sky. Good, sweep your hands forward, elbows stay straight as you plant your palm. And you might walk your left hand back a little bit towards the wall. Yeah. And then try to find space now between your left armpit and your left hip crease. It's like you're reaching your left hip crease towards the back of your mat. Nice, LJ. Just take about 3 more good breaths. Your next exhalation, please drag your left hand back so it's just in front of your face. Good. On an exhale, slowly unwind. 3 rounds of Chakravrasana, just exhaling back to child's pose to lengthen the low back. And inhale right back up to all fours. Good. Twice more on your own. Next time you come to child's pose, please pause. Let your elbows rest into the floor. And take 3 big breaths low into your belly. Try to expand your stomach into the thigh bones. And notice what that feels like on your low back. One more next inhalation, please lift yourself up. Come onto your sit bones into your comfortable cross-leg position. So we're coming back to sequencing again. We talked in the beginning about how important it is to warm up the muscle groups that you're going to be working before these peak postures. And for back bends, you absolutely have to do twist afterwards. I mean, if you've got a class full of pregnant people, just do open twist, but do something to move the back around so that those muscles don't freeze in that back bending posture. Like we said, they like to grip, and sometimes they forget to let go. And that's like where knots come from. If you guys get massage, that's where your knots are. Those are just muscles that have forgotten how to relax. So in your comfortable cross-leg position, we'll just do some simple twist. You'll sit up as tall as you can. Good, be sure that the spine's not arching here, so the low ribs draw in, the low back's long. Good, take a deep breath, stretch your arms towards the sky. And as you exhale, easy twist to the right. Right hand comes to the floor behind you, left hand out front. Good, use your right arm like a kickstand just to hold the spine tall. And then if you want to add the neck in here, you'll just gently take your gaze over your right shoulder. Some of you might even tilt your right ear towards the floor, softening the left side of your neck. Please re-lift through the crown of your head. On your next inhalation, come back to center, lift both arms up. And then exhale over to the left side. Be sure that the low back is not arching. Low ribs draw in. If it feels okay on your neck, you can turn your gaze over your left shoulder. And maybe even tilt your left ear towards the floor. One more. Next in breath, please re-lift your gaze. And rotate to center, lift both arms up. And now hip stretches also feel really good after back bend. So release your hands to the floor. Keep your hips heavy as you walk your palms out. Now this fold's going to look a little bit different for everyone, and it might take you a few breaths to get into your deepest shape. It's helpful to find a little traction beneath your hands. It's like you're pressing your mat away from your body and lengthening your hips towards the back of your mat. And just like you've done in child's pose, take big breaths into the lowest space in your belly. And let your head go. Chin towards the chest. Your head might even touch the floor or a block. Walk your hands back. Take a breath seated tall. So when you come out of a fold, your muscles have been lengthening. It's important just to take a few breaths at neutral so that they have a second to come back. And we're just going to switch the cross of the legs. Bring some equality into the hips. Inhale, reach your arms up. Keep your spine tall as you twist easily to your right. Time, you might turn your gaze towards your right shoulder and then tilt your ear to the left ear towards the floor. And feel the right shoulder or the right neck soft. And carefully relift your head. Inhale to center, lift both arms up. And exhale to your left side. That's as tall as you can. Maybe turn your gaze towards your left shoulder. Maybe tilt your right ear towards the floor. It seems a little counterintuitive. head. Please inhale to center, lift up both arms. And exhale, fingertips to the floor. Keep your hips heavy as you walk your hands out. You might not fold quite so far with this awkward leg in front. Okay, if you've still got some tension in your back, give yourself a few breaths to settle into this posture. Remembering that the more time you spend in the shape, the more your body opens up to it. So most of us don't move immediately into our deepest version of these poses. A little traction beneath the hands might feel good on the back, like you're stretching your hips back. And your next inhalation, walk your hands to center, lift your chest up. So like we talked about before, the hips have to work really hard to support the low back in those postures. All that work in the glutes is strengthening the hips, and sometimes they get kind of grippy and tight. So we'll do like a seated pigeon pose. You can stretch both legs forward to start. And then let's cross the right ankle over the left thigh. Fingertips are back behind you. Good, lift your chest up here and slide your left heel back. And your foot doesn't have to come flat into the floor, so just pause when you find a stretch in your right hip. Good, be sure that your shoulders can relax. And then you can actually massage this stretch into your leg by rocking from side to side. And what that's doing is moving your femur bone around in that hip socket, massaging those tissues that are deep in the socket. So all those connective ligaments, those deeper structural muscles. And a lot of times you'll find a sweet spot kind of in an awkward position, but listen, if it feels good, you just stay there. Just snuggle on.
Teapot, I think.
And then you might find after that hips warmed up a little bit, you might be able to bring your left heel back. And just take about 3 more breaths here. The more you reach your right knee forward, the more you'll feel that stretch in the hip socket. Good. And your next inhalation, stretch your left leg forward. And stand the right foot outside the left leg. Sit up as tall as you can. And then exhalation, turn towards your right knee. Just hug your knee with your left elbow. Yeah, so the right hand comes to the floor behind you. And you might turn your gaze back over that right shoulder.
I'm so dyslexic. I have no
So
idea.
just turn the opposite way, Bracken, and you'll do the. So bring your left hand to the floor behind you. Yeah, there you go. You just want to look at that good looking hump that's on the mat next to you. I don't blame you. The Alabama accent gets me every time. But I did. Like the first time I met Kevin, I was like, ooh, I love you. Like my brother from another mother.
Oh, I love you too.
You're going to say that because I taught you how to flip off the wall. Come on back to center. Yeah, let's place right foot inside the right thigh. Sit up as tall as you can. Try to line your breastbone up with your left big toe or whatever toe's out front. And then lengthen forward. And you guys are going to love Chris Conieris because he gives us full permission to round the spine in these forward folds, and it feels really good. It's about dropping your head towards your heart and breathing into the space right beneath your, or right between your shoulder blades. Just about 2 more breaths here. And next inhalation, slowly lift up. This time, you'll stretch your right foot forward. And cross your left ankle over your right thigh. Be sure your toes are flexed, it's just safer for the knee. And drag your right heel back. Fingertips on the floor behind you, and you're in that seated version of pigeon pose. notice it's a little different on this side. Feel like you can rock from side to side. Sometimes you've got enough sensation just staying still at center. That's where your personal practice comes in. Now, Jeff Bleach says that that's the difference between an advanced student and a beginner student, is an advanced student knows when to stop. And the beginner student's just going to go into every single variation of a pose until the leg falls off.
It's just written all over me, isn't it?
If you find sort of a sweet spot, feel free to pause there and breathe. I mean, we all do it. It's like in our nature, I think. Those of us that are drawn to yoga, we're all like, I want to learn how to, balance on my nose and hula hoop on my left foot, like we're all Cirque du Soleil or something. And if you want, you can relift that right knee when your heel a little further back. And take 3 big breaths into your left hip. And then stretching your right foot forward. Stand your left foot outside your right leg. Sit up as tall as you can. As you exhale, turn towards your knee, hugging your knee with your elbow, and maybe turning your gaze back over your shoulder. Good, so all these seated postures are working on loosening up the hips, wringing out the spine. Remember that your low back and your hips are so closely connected that by stretching out the muscles in your hips, you're also working on the muscles in your back. Got some tension here. This is a good way to help unwind. Next exhalation, slowly rotate forward. Just take a breath seated tall. And then place your left foot inside your right thigh, just like Janu Shirshasana or like a seated tree pose. Fingertips on the floor, sit up as tall as you can, and try to line your breastbone up with your right big toe. So this posture is like a twofer. You get a little bit of a twist as well as a forward fold. So on the exhalation, you're leaning over your right leg. And then allow your shoulders to curl in just a little bit. Head towards the heart. Breathe into the space right between your shoulder blades. Inhalation, slowly lift up. Take a breath seated tall. And then stretch your left foot next to your right. Draw the inner edges of your legs together. Flex the toes back toward your face. And your inhalation, reach your arms next to your ears. And as you exhale, fold forward. Now it's up to you in this shape. The longer you keep your spine, the more you'll feel this stretch in the outer edges of your legs. And if you let your chest and shoulders curl a little bit, you'll feel that stretch more along the center line of your back. You might play around reaching the breastbone forward, and curling the shoulders in, and just find whatever feels best for you. Now returning your attention to equal ratio breath. Take 5 full rounds, and the exhalation be equal in length to the right. To the inhale. exhalation, slowly lift up. And take a breath seated tall so the muscles in your back can neutralize. So do we have any bolsters in this room? Well, does everybody have at least like 2 or 3 blankets? I can do those instead. So we're going to build up a bolster for a couple of supported postures. So you'll take 2 blankets, fold them like a hot dog bun, and set those up one on top of the other. And 3 would actually be ideal if there's any extras anywhere.
Giving us what you want. You might want to do this. This might be
Yeah, yeah.
Put one
I
blanket
wasn't
left.
thinking.
Misty might need it.
I've got 2
I'm
blankets.
gonna set LJ up over here. You're gonna set your blankets up parallel to your mat, so long edges meet up. And then she's gonna turn her knees towards me, drop her hips over here next to her bolster, and let her feet be on just one side. Now she's gonna sit up as tall as she can, and then turn to face the blankets. And then she'll keep all that length in her spine as she lays her belly down on the blanket. And she'll rest on her right cheek. Good. So you're just gonna twist with your torso supported by the blanket, and it's gonna give you something to kind of breathe into. So, do you need some more?
I need one more.
One more blanket?
Unless you
got
wanna
the
use a
bowl.
bolster.
Oh,
Here's the
It's just, because this is like, these are
Yeah,
glass
Misty
blanket.
could use.
Oh,
Okay.
I
you
don't
want a
know.
bolster instead?
I have no idea.
I mean, it's the same difference. This is a little bit sturdier.
Okay,
Here, you take this, I'll take the blanket.
alright.
Actually, you keep one of these.
There's more bolsters
Put that
in
on
there
top
too,
of
someone
it.
prefers to have one.
Do you prefer a bolster?
This is for Pinky.
Let me get you one more blanket.
Are we like at, is our hips
Your hips should be
hingely
touching it.
touching? Okay.
I don't see another blanket. There's some more blankies and everything else in that room in there.
Oh,
So,
okay,
yeah.
thank you. Anybody like this bolster? You feel okay with those 2 blankets, or do you want a little more height?
I think it needs a little more.
Here, I want this one more. There you go.
Thanks.
So your head should be more or less in line with your hips. And us women, you know, our hips are gonna probably be a little bit taller for most of us. And I learned these postures from Caroline. She's a big fan of like snuggling up with your props. So if you want to wrap your arms around your pillows, it's just kind of a sweet thing to do.
Does it matter which side your head goes?
So it's a little easier on your neck if you're facing the same direction as your knees. Some people really like that extra twist in the neck. So if you want to try, you can turn your head to the opposite side, maybe rest on your left cheek for a moment. And then if that tenses up your shoulders, it's a good idea just to... And in these last few breaths, think about expanding your belly into those props. Once again, tuning into the count of your breath. And focusing a little bit more on your exhale, just to be sure that your lungs are completely empty. There's lots of space for fresh breath to move in. Please walk your hands back so they're right underneath your shoulders. Let your head remain heavy as you lift yourself up off your props. Just take a breath there. And now you can keep your props where they are. turn your back toward your props, and then just flip your knees over to the other side. Try to gather as much length as you can in your spine. Turn to face those blankets, and then keep your spine long as you walk your hands out. And then it's your choice. It's a little easier on the neck to turn your gaze in the same direction as your knees. And if it really feels great on your neck, you can turn your head to the left, resting on your right cheek. And allow your body to relax, consciously relax. Feel your belly breathing into your props. And each time you exhale, let all the breath out. If you feel comfortable with Samavriti, you might return to that pattern. Shoulders, your head heavy, you should lift yourself up and take a breath. Now you'll just turn to face your bolster. Separate your knees for a widening child's pose. And hug those blankets in as close to your thighs as you can. For those of you that have longer torsos, you might have to move them away. Hands on your knees, sit up as tall as you can. Good, and hug these in a little bit more. Good, now keep your spine long as you walk your hands out, draping your belly over your props and just resting on whatever cheek feels good. This is another place where it's nice to kind of hug your blankies. About 4 or 5 breaths low into your belly. Doing your best to expand that abdominal wall so that your low back muscles can stretch out more. Start to think about extending your exhalation so that it's slightly longer than your in-breath. If you're inhaling to the count of 4, try exhaling to the count of 6. Engaging that lambana property of your practice, the grounding effects of yoga, giving your brain the message that it's time to let go. If you're resting on one cheek, please turn your head to the opposite side. From here, you're just gonna turn your props sideways so they're perpendicular to your mat. And set yourself up with Shavasana or for Shavasana with those props underneath your knees. And lie down. Put whatever extra clothing you might want. You'll notice that when you lie back here with the knees elevated, a little bit more space for your low back to relax. It might also be helpful to lift your hips up, get your tailbone towards the front of your mat, and then lower the hips back down. And sometimes Shavasana just doesn't feel good on your low back, so especially after back bending practices, I always give the option to take Shavasana with the knees bent, heels as wide as the mat, and knees just rest together. If that's preferable to you, give yourself what you need. In these last few moments of your practice, do your best to surrender any muscular effort. Giving your body a few still moments here to soak up all the benefits of your physical practice. To send that energy deep into whatever subtle layers or corners of your body need it the most. Please continue Samavriti if that's working for you. Perhaps extending the exhalation. your attention back into your body by deepening your breath. Brushing your thumbs softly across the tips of your fingers. Rolling your head from side to side to side. And as you feel ready, please place your feet flat into the floor. And roll carefully to one side. Taking a moment, fetal position. And just to check in with how you feel. Asking yourself, how do you feel physically, as well as how do you feel mentally. Please use the strength of your arms as you lift yourself into a comfortable seat. On your palms and close your eyes. And reconnecting once again with your intention for this practice, the intention behind your training, and honoring yourself, putting your body and your mind through this transformative process that is teacher training. For making it through another 3 days. And close with 3 vibrational ohms. Please begin by exhaling completely. Inhale. Releasing your head. Namaste.
Namaste.
For letting me have some time with you.
Thanks.
If y'all have questions about anything, feel free to holler at me. And I love to hear about dreams after backbending practices. Because there's some energy happening there. So if you have some weird dreams, email them to me, and I'll tell you what they mean. I'll give you my own personal interpretation.
What are good ways to, because I just don't have that openness, flexibility at all right now. And what are some ways to sort of work on?
There are a lot of good stretches you can do. You know, you see people with the straps. Sorry, you just listen a lot where you're working on the rotation in your shoulders.